Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Broad Reach podcast. This is episode 10. We are delighted to bring another episode. We had a small bit of a break there because Sean was actually away sailing, which we'll talk about at the end of the episode. But we're delighted to be back. There's a lot happening in the race, and the most exciting thing is the leaders are approaching Les Sables D'Olonne now, and we have a situation now where they're really fighting through the doldrums. They're coming out of a really bad system with no wind. Well, the front pack, which is Kirsten, Abhilash, and Simon, who is showing his prowess and consistency again. Simon trying to take the lead out of everyone, but as we mentioned before, Simon Corbin is in the Chichester class. So Abhilash and Kirsten are fighting for the lead and trying to race to the finish to win the Golden Globe race, which started last year. Just to remind everybody, these skippers have been racing for months and months, so the mental fatigue and the rations, they're going to town on the rations now, and it's all coming to fruition. But it's been a long road. But what we might do is we'll get Sean to start there and have a look at the tracker and talk about what's been happening.
Sure thing. I'm just going to share my screen. Think you can see that?
Yeah, can see that now.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, you mentioned rations there. Kirsten's team posted a photo of Kirsten in front of like 8 craft beers, and I wonder, has she moved on to the craft beer now at this stage, or are they still? Have they run out of water in the doldrums, or are they still okay? But no, I just thought it was a great photo. I'll start at the back, and when I say the back, it's actually Guy here who I'll do a quick update on him in a bit. But he's just rounded Cape Horn, which is an incredible achievement for him as well. Got around safely. He's on his way to Les Sables D'Olonne, and I'm sure he's going to be thinking here, Ian's not that far ahead. Maybe he can pass and get close. I'm sure that would be great fun if they can manage to have a bit of a race. Ian as well, Shane. I don't think we've done an update on Ian since the last episode. Is now in Chichester, right? So maybe you just want to. Do you want to just explain to us what happened with Ian and the difficulties he had? I know he had to anchor just around the south of Cape Horn.
Yeah, I know Ian ran into a little bit of trouble there. He had to pull in pretty close to Cape Horn. I think around the 22nd of March, I think Ian he called the team, the GGR team. He was in big seas. I think he had thrown out a drogue. I think his hydrovane rudder broke, Sean. That was what happened. So he made his way to a little island, Tierra del Fuego, to do some repairs in the archipelago there, So, look, I think one thing that we have to say about Ian is he's, his boat was extremely well prepared. He's been sailor, but I mean, approaching Cape Horn, he might have, and it's something that Don mentioned and something that Sean on our podcast kind of mentioned. Ian was he was sailing a little bit conservatively as he approached Cape Horn, and I think there was a little bit of a window there to try and get in front of the system. So look, it's not a criticism, obviously, but he's trying to protect his boat. But sometimes, it's something that Sean and I have spoken about. You have to kind of push it, really. Like you got to push the boat almost to its limit sometimes, And we see that, especially with Simon. Like Simon Corbin, for me, is I think he's one of the best skippers in the whole fleet, because he shows how moving from a system to a system, you have to maximize the potential of the wind, whether it be your sail arrangement, whether it be your movements, your tacking. Like I'm not saying he's better than Ian, but like Ian has been a little bit conservative. Let's be honest. Like, and he's gone out of his way to avoid some big systems, you know, which is fine. But it's just it may have led to him being caught in that system in Cape Horn. But like, look, this race is very unpredictable as well.
Yeah, look, so it's fair. It's fair. What you're saying is fair, Shane. It's such a fine balance, right? There's such a fine balance, and we did talk about this even on the previous podcast as Ian was approaching. It's such a fine balance of pushing the boat versus getting past the system. And there was a window, as you said, to get around Cape Horn, and we were like we were talking off air. We were like, we really hope he pushes it. And that he had a rip in his sail, and we were like, can he, we talked about, it's not so simple to fix that rip, but it probably was a lot simpler to fix that rip than to go in and anchor and solve the drogue, which had got tangled in the hydrovane and broke it. You know what I mean? So,
he knows, he's very aware of the attrition of the race as well.
Yeah,
he is playing, he's still in the race, but he knows Chester, which is fine, but
I think if you take what we were saying is, if you take the pain early and you do the difficult work up front, you might not get into a more difficult situation. That was what we were debating this, and I know we had differing views and differences of opinion on it. And like you say, it's not a criticism, because he could easily have snuck around, and then we'd be saying, "Wow, it was such a brilliant approach to be conservative coming up to Cape Horn,"
Yeah.
So it's a very, very tough one, but we, like at the time, we were saying we really hope he pushes it to get past this system.
100%. But look, what he's done is incredible. We have to say that as well. What he's done is incredible to get as far as he's gotten. But once again, Sean, how many hydrovane problems have we had in the race?
Yeah, it's funny because I follow the comments, and I know because Don will be on this as soon as he sees that and be like, hang on a second, lads, it's not the hydrovanes, it's user error. That was user error. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Not that I'm not saying he made a mistake, but if your drogue gets caught in the vein, that is not an issue with the hydrovane. That's of course it's the sea, it's the conditions, but I mean, the skipper has control of that to some degree. Of course, look, if a big wave comes in and it wraps it around, there's nothing you can do. But I mean, you definitely can't blame the hydrovane in that case. I would say that's based on what I know anyway, Shane.
Is there a way of avoiding that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be probably so careful if you're retrieving. Like, that's one of the dangers of using a drogue. If you put anything off the back, it's why when we're coming into, even in very simple parking maneuvers, Shane, when we're coming into marinas, right? You have to, before you start the engine, you have to check over the sides of the boat. Is there any lines running in the water? And very often, kind of these, like boats in the Med, for example, with the swimming platforms off the back, lines can just fly out the back very easily. And you have to be so careful, because if you start a motor with a line in the water, you can wrap the propeller. And sometimes you can actually rip a hole in the boat in a really extreme situation. You can also wrap the keel on a mooring line in a marina. You can wrap it on. I mean, I've seen so many. I've been on a boat that where an anchor got wrapped around the prop in the middle of March off the coast of the southwest coast of England, and there was actually two skippers on this boat. It was during the clipper training, and it was unbelievable what they did, but they jumped over the side and dived in and cut the rope off the prop.
Wow.
It was actually, I was so impressed by how they actually handled the situation. It was incredible. Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, it was a awful situation that we got ourselves into, but and it just, you want to really avoid anything getting around. Anything get attached on the rudder, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about that as well, in relation to something else. Anything getting caught on the keel, anything getting caught on the prop, or on the hydrovanes. You just have to avoid that. Like, that has to be the top of your list when you're deploying anything over the side of the boat.
Yeah.
So he would have known that. Of course, Ian would have known that, but how it got caught, I haven't a clue. So we should wait until we find out. But my point is, it's not a hydrovane error as far as I'm concerned.
User
I mean, again, I want to be very slow to put that out, but it's because I don't know what actually was it a wave, a rogue wave. I mean, something like that can happen. You've no control, but like it definitely can't be put down to something breaking with the hydrovane. I think, as far as I know. Right. So we've done Guy, we've done Ian. We better get going with the update because I know we've lost talk about it. And we're going to do it'll be a quick enough update today, and we're going to do a lengthier episode the next one because we've so much to catch up on.
Yeah.
Right. Let me get back to the tracker here. So Ian, of course, is on his way. He's had to kind of peel off to the east a bit because he had northwesterlies. He's hitting a soft spot now, but then he should be on his way if he can hook into this system here. Jeremy as well. Jeremy has had such a tough time. It's like every single storm that was in this race he's been in. And I think he's been in the most amount of systems compared to anybody else in terms of heavy weather in this race. So he's really taken the battering. So he's had a few funny comments when he's talked about these things, but he's getting there and he's making progress and doing an unreal job.
Well, his boat has held up, hasn't it? You know,
absolutely.
It was barnacles that knocked him out.
Yeah, as barnacles and water. He ran out of water as well. That was another reason. Food, I think. Gug as well has been doing well. He has a penalty that he has to face. Remember that, Shane? Because if you remember when he was coming across the no-go zone, the orange no-go zone, which was, people might not have an idea. So this zone here, you had to stay north of this for safety reasons. Gug dipped in, so he's got a 4-hour penalty. So he's got to serve that penalty. At Don and the race committee will decide, but it's somewhere up here. When he's in good winds, they'll basically give him a line and say, you can't go north of that line for 4 hours. And Gug is really annoyed about that, apparently. And Don gave that update a few days ago and said, look, Gug doesn't want to serve this notice, but he's going to have to. It's part of the rules.
Yeah.
So look, that's just... It'll be fine. He'll do it, and it'll frustrate him. But it looks like he's getting through the doldrums. So there's no other way to put this, but Kirsten had an absolute nightmare over the last 2 weeks. And even though I was away sailing, Shane, I was following this, and I was just praying that she'd get a breakthrough, just because it must be so frustrating. She was over here. Well, we can actually put on the tracks. So Kirsten was over here in this spot, and she was over here for ages, and it wasn't this much wind. It was blue like a pond, and Gug seems to be sneaking through here, which is fantastic. Kirsten was over here, Simon was here getting a little bit more wind, and Abhilash was out here getting more wind. And I think the real winner here is definitely Abhilash in terms of the GGR, because he's closing the gap, but Simon is now closest to Les Sables D'Olonne of everybody in the race. Even though he's not in the GGR, he's now the closest by about 20 miles to the actual finish. So he's in front. That's just
very impressive.
Something to update, yeah. So in terms of the GGR, Kirsten is still in the lead. It's very hard to tell here. Like if we zoom out, you have to remember that they need to get to Les Sables D'Olonne here, okay?
You see, Simon and Abhilash have gone west there. Like in the recent SoundCloud call, Simon mentioned that he's ended up going almost 45 degrees. He's going west more than north, and that's because of the doldrum winds, but and just the way things are at the moment. And he mentioned small waves killing the speed of the boat as he heads north. So they've just ended up going west a lot. So Kirsten is actually, I think she is closer than the other two to Les Sables D'Olonne at the moment. Is she, Sean? Sorry, she's closer than Abhilash, but Simon is closer than her.
Closer than Abhilash. Yeah, I'll actually show you, Shane, how we look at this. So if you click on leaderboard over here, you can see Kirsten has got, this is not perfect, but it should be along the run line. And the run line, as a reminder to everyone, is if we're to draw a line from where they are to the finish, or the shortest distance in the whole route around the world, that's called the rum line, and it's this line here with the red arrows pointing back. So obviously they're not on that line because the wind is pushing them off it and they need to sail away from it. And for strategic reasons, you don't want to be on that line all the time, because coming up here, up the coast of Africa, is not the traditional route to get back. You need to kind of swing up here, up towards the Azores, and then kind of grab onto these westerly winds here and get into the Bay of Biscay here, like Jean-Luc has done in 2018, this light blue line. That's kind of the sort of direction they're going to be aiming for. So from that perspective, Kirsten's actually in an advantageous position over both Simon and Abhilash, because she has what's called the windward position, meaning that like they need to beat back into the wind to get back up at some point. Now, Abhilash could get lucky, and sometimes I know Don actually did a piece on this. I mean, these westerlies can drop down, right? So if these westerlies were to come down a little bit here, and this system wasn't exactly where it is, Abhilash could potentially hook into them and swing up here. But as it is at the moment, he's getting this wind right on the nose. Okay, and it's a little more favorable the way it is for Kirsten, so which wasn't the case earlier in the week. So she's in a better position actually. She's still ahead, but it's very much all to play for in terms of it's all about tactics now and luck getting up here, as far as I can see. Simon, of course, is going.
Sorry, Sean. In Kirsten's SoundCloud call, her most recent one, she sounded very frustrated. I felt very sorry for her, but she, fingers crossed she's going to be finished with doldrums now. She mentioned she's basically had a month, three bad weeks of hardly any wind. But she mentioned her current sailing configuration. She's close-hauled. Sean, would you mind explaining what that means for everybody?
Yeah. That basically means that she's going as close to the wind as she possibly can. So all the sails will be tight. If she has, what's she in here wind-wise? I don't know. She's in 20 knots anyway. It's probably a bit less. It's probably 15 knots. She's probably got all of her sails up at this stage, I would guess, or close to that. She might have a reef in, depending on what conditions there are, but she'll have everything in tight. You'll tighten everything up essentially as much as you can that makes the sailing of the boat efficient, and she'll be going as close to the wind as she possibly can, Shane. That's what close hauled is. The next one, I remember we talked about beam reach, which is when the wind is on the side. And in between close hauled and beam reach, you have what's called close reach, which is a little bit off the wind.
Okay.
So not quite as close to the wind. So she's essentially trying to get as north as she can, rather than drifting out to the west, because that's essentially where the course home is. So she's tightening it in and sailing as close to the wind as she can. I suspect Simon and Abhilash are doing exactly the same.
Yeah, I might as well mention in the recent SoundCloud calls as well, the satellite calls, that if people don't know about them, you should definitely check them out. The Golden Globe race team call the skippers, I think it's almost weekly or fortnightly, and so you can hear them on the boats. It's incredible. Sometimes it's hard to hear them, but the most recent calls, both Abhilash and Simon have mentioned something that's in the international news at the moment in terms of ocean science and the environmental stuff. There's a Sargasso weed, and basically there's a massive mat of Sargasso weed, which both Simon and Abhilash have been caught in. So it's affected Abhilash his wind pilot, and Simon mentioned it catches in the rudder. Both of them have had to be on the helm and ready to clear it. They're talking about it could be the biggest bloom of Sargasso weed in history, and it's actually on its way to the Caribbean and Florida. So it's a major story because it has a big effect on tourism. What happens is it washes up on beaches and it rots, and local councils and businesses end up spending up like sometimes millions trying to clear it, you know. So it grows in clear waters, kind of east of Bermuda in the Atlantic, and it's kind of amazing that the lads have mentioned. They both mentioned it in the recent calls. It must be incredible to see, but obviously it must be to do with climate change. But it's going to be interesting to see.
Do they have any idea, Shane, what's causing it?
I don't know, Sean, to be honest. I've only read as much as the information I've just shared. I must read into it a bit more. But Don mentioned it's a major issue. And it's obviously, I think Simon talked a little bit about how Robin Knox Johnson had mentioned it from the original race, and now it's dramatically increased since then. So thank God they're not getting completely stuck in it anyway. But it's kind of worrying in terms of ocean environmental issues. But it's just one to think about.
Sargasso weed. I'm guessing it has something to do with the Sargasso Sea, possibly. Sargasso Sea, which looks to be off the coast of North America. I think, is that where the eels go? The eels that come to Ireland? I think they come from the Sargasso Sea. I remember that from school.
Yeah, you could be right there.
I'm open to correction on that, but I remember our grandfather talking about, because we used to have eels off the west coast of Ireland. I don't know if you had them down in Cork, Shane, but we had them in Mayo. We used to catch eels.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing creatures, like the strange water snakes, we used to call them around here.
Now that you mention it, I remember there was a connection between the Sargasso Sea and some of those eels, wasn't there? We'll have to look into the weed issue more.
Yeah, we can't be caught on that. I was trying to think, was it the salmon? But the salmon go up to Norway, don't they? My brother will know the answer to that. I will ask him. Shane, I'm there's a couple of things I want to just quickly show. There's one I want to share an update on Guy as well. So I'm just going to share the screen again. So if you just give me a second. So I'm going to show. So Guy Waits has just rounded Cape Horn, and he got this really nice letter from the Association of Cape Horners, who we've talked about before on the show. I'm going to read it out. So this is they write to Julia. Dear Julia, we'd be grateful if you can pass this on to Guy, the International Association of Cape Horners, and the President Sir Robin Knox Johnson, and Vice President Jean-Luc, who we both know, both of those very famous characters. Congratulate Guy on rounding the horn on Sagarmatha. Great achievement, even though you're no longer part of the GGR. We wish you well on the run home to Les Sables D'Olonne, fair winds and following sea. Ashley, I just thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, look, that's great. You have to admire Guy Waits. I mean, the determination to pick up when he's not in the race anymore at all, and to say, I'm going to keep going. Like, that's, you know what, that's inspiring for all of us. Like, you know, what's the point in just throwing the toys out of the pram and saying, I'm not going to bother. I'm not even in the race anymore. What's the point? And he's gone the opposite way. He said, I'm going to do this, you know.
100% agree with you, Shane. I think it's incredibly it's a arguably tougher challenge when you're unplugged. And I was delighted to see as well that, like, Don does a Friday update, and it actually talks a bit more than just every Friday about Guy, which is fantastic. And as I understand, they're going to do a call with Guy, a SoundCloud call, now that he's rounded the horn, and do an update. So that would be great to see. And I think it's great that we plug in with him and we will until the end of the race, because it's like we said a few weeks ago, what he's doing is equally as challenging, if not even more challenging, because he's doing it on his own as the other competitors. 100%. So fair play.
100%.
Quick update on the stats, Shane. So GGR underground as usual, fantastic. Look at how Simon in the front. This is the first time I've seen this.
Wow.
Now we know that. Look, CH there's an asterisk beside this. He's Chichester, but he'll be delighted. And here we have. Kirsten is 30 miles. I thought it was 20, so obviously that's changed, or they're using different metrics than I was using. Abhilash is 120, so Abhilash is 90 behind Kirsten. I had it at 100, so whatever. It's very close. Maybe there was an update there. Actually, it just rolled over, did it? Possibly did. At 10.
I mean, it's incredible, Sean, isn't it? Like he stopped. Like Simon stopped. I know he's in the lead again after he was in the lead for so much of the race. Like he has to be commended for his sailing throughout this race.
He stopped for a week. He was anchored for a week. Look at his speeds. I mean, Abhilash has been doing very well. Now, what I don't know about this speed log is that the speed of the boat, or is it the VMG? And those are two very different things. So VMG is like vector made good, or velocity made good, which is your speed towards Les Sables D'Olonne. And that will be very different to your boat speed, because Abhilash will be flying in terms of his boat speed through the water, but he's gone away from the course to some degree.
He's going saying.
So I'm not.
It might just be a general, like it does say speed 4-hour intervals there. Is that what they are?
Yeah, well, they're picking that up from the tracker. It's probably VMG, to be honest. It probably is. I stand to be corrected on that, because it would tie in with what has happened in the last while, and that they've all gotten ground. But I want to just jump back to Kirsten and the SoundCloud. Kirsten's still in the lead. It's like, does she even know that? Does she know?
I think she's convinced herself that everyone's passing her out by her.
Yeah, because weeks ago, she thought Abhilash was way ahead. And obviously we can't say, oh, please get the message to Kirsten. We can't say that because it's not allowed. But I just wonder, would she, if she only thought, because she must be passing some boats. I think she's I want to be very careful here, but you can get information about where you are as long as you do it through like VHF radio or HF radios. There's definitely ways you can do it legally, isn't there?
She passed 2 ships and one of them ignored her, she said. All right. And the other one gave her weather and no other information.
It's just because so much of this is a psychological game.
Yeah.
And if she knew she was 100 miles in front, like, she's winning the race. She's winning the race. And I wish you would love to just get that message through, because if she can get into a positive frame of mind, it could have a big impact. And we want everyone to be in a positive frame of mind anyway, regardless of the race. Yeah. But if you only knew where she actually was, she might have a total different way of looking at it. So Shane, that's pretty much it for the race update. I think we've covered everything. The Sargasso weed, Simon's closest to the finish, and Guy rounding the horn, and Kirsten's still in the lead. I mean, I have it here in my notes. Kirsten's still in the lead. So that's pretty
Sean,
much it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about you were sailing recently in Greece? Do you want to just talk a little bit briefly about some places that you were sailing and what was your favorite port there? Do you want to just talk to people a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think I have to explain our absence over the last 2 weeks. So yeah, I mean, I was off. It wasn't exactly Mediterranean sun, and it wasn't those conditions. It was a lot of wind, but that's why we were there. So we were in the Cyclades, I think. Can you see the navionics chart here, Shane?
Yeah, I can see that, Sean.
So we started out I'll just give a very quick update of what we're doing, and then we're hopefully going to do a good bit more sailing this summer in Greece. So it was kind of just doing some preparatory work. Preparatory work, is that how you say it? For this trip in Greece in the summer. So we flew into Athens, and we started off in this port down here in Lavrion. just down here. And then we were doing a lot of navigation without instruments, Shane. So no GPS. This was just kind of almost like a training, but we were using all traditional equipment. We weren't using sextants, but all 3-point fixing, and so no GPS allowed to get anywhere. So that was brilliant and like a really good. I have done quite a bit of it in the past, but it's been a while, and you get rusty very quickly, which is like you really. I remember Don talking about using the sextant. He's like, God, you forget it, and like I really forgot it until I was put under pressure, and they're like, okay, figure it out, and you do figure it out, but it takes a lot of looking at the chart down below and going and getting the protractors and the rulers and the dividers and the compass out on deck, and you're like, but it's cool. You're taking fixes off these lighthouses here that you see on these
It must be nerve-wracking,
It is, because I'll tell you what, when I was doing it, I was thinking, wow, it's easy for us because we can see islands that you can pinpoint your position on. But when you're out in the middle of the ocean with just a sextant, I mean, and you're anywhere near a reef, you're thinking, my reading better be right. Are you approaching land? Are you approaching the Canary Islands, Cape Verdes, wherever, the coast of South Africa, the coast of Australia, Hobart,
Trinidad to Hobart.
Jesus, I mean, Ian coming into Cape Horn, like you better be right. We have the backup where you can quickly open the phone if you're in an emergency and look at the GPS. They don't have that luxury, so it brought it home for me. I can be sure about that. So we spent a lot of time in Kittinas here. So we went into this little port, really nice little village.
Do all of these islands have their own little coast guard, Sean? Their own, like the harbours. Like when you're approaching and you have to call, do you call the local?
Sorry. I see what you mean. Okay. Well, yeah, there's a distinction in that you'd have the Coast Guard will always be on. Remember Channel 16? We were talking about that a few weeks ago. Yeah, so they'll all be on. So we have the VHF radio with us, and we'll be on Channel 16.
When I say Coast Guard, what I'm trying to say is when you're approaching the port and you want to say to them, look, I'm coming into port,
Yeah.
Do all of these islands have their own representatives?
So, no is the answer, short answer, but there's a caveat to that. So some do, some don't. So this place, Maricha, no. So you come in here, it's very different, the way you moor in the Mediterranean, Shane, versus in the UK, Ireland and America and Italy. So if this was in the UK, there'd be these kind of finger pontoons coming out, and you drive forward and you park alongside. If you remember the video of Pat coming into Cape Town, remember Pat came in, it was quite windy. Don met him on the dock with Ada.
Yeah.
And he came in, he drove in forward and parked alongside. It was quite windy. You rarely see that in the Med. Mm-hmm. So what people normally do is you see the anchor sign here is you drop your anchor out here as far out as you can, and you reverse into the dock. And then it's a very tricky maneuver, actually. And it was very new for me. So it took me a couple of goals to get it right. I'm going to hold my hands up on that. But you drop your anchor and you reverse in slowly, and you have to make sure there's tension on the anchor, but you also need to make sure the chain is long enough, because very often you're anchoring with crosswind. So you have winds coming from this direction or from this direction. So you need to make sure that you allow for that sort of leeway as you're going in, and you need speed and power to maintain your way in the water, so that, when you're going into the dock, you don't drift down here on the other boats or drift up here. Which way the wind was happened to be coming from this direction. So we had to be really
great experience learning all that.
It was very tricky. And then you tie the back of the boat to like what are called cleats, or bollards on the pontoon, and that's how it's done in the Med. And then it's classic, you just walk off the back of the boat and you're into the taverna. So that we were in this little taverna here for a big dinner. So like that's the reward after you do the Med mooring. But so there was no VHF there, Shane. Okay, but then on the other
VHF at all.
Wow. No, you come in and you just do it. You execute your maneuver. You pick your spot.
Do they use systems of flags?
No, nothing. So you like you come in and nobody says you can park here, you can park there. You come in, you pick where you're going to drop the anchor, you pick your spot that you're going to land, which taverna, you pick your taverna, you pick which boats you're going to go between, and you go for it. It's full autonomy of what you're doing. Now, will it be the same as that in the summer? Possibly not. Sometimes you ring the taverna and they say, look, we've a spot for you outside of our place. Drop your anchor, and they'll be waiting, like waving you on the dock like this.
That's brilliant.
It'll be the guy there with the apron on sometimes, and he's there ready with and he's like, you come in, and if you eat at our taverna, the mooring for the night is free. That kind of thing.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Every country, it's different. And like, I find this stuff fascinating because every time you do it, you have to learn. So Greece was new for me. So like this anchoring stern to maneuver was totally different for me.
That's brilliant.
In Croatia, it's different again. It's a lot of mooring buoys. You have some anchoring to the port, and you have a lot of what are called mooring lines or slime lines, which are essentially, there's a concrete block around here, and then coming off that, there's lines that run to the dock, and you pull them up and attach them to the front of the boat. It's hard to explain without showing it, so we could do that some other day. But just to answer your question very quickly about the VHF, and then I know we're going to wrap up. And we can definitely go in, because I love talking about this, Shane, as you can see.
Yeah, maybe we'll have another episode, Sean, where we can talk about some of the ports that you've been in and have another look at these charts, because it would be nice to give this a bit more time, you know?
Yeah, and I'll stop sharing the screen here. But basically, the marina that we went in, that we departed from and returned to at the end, Shane, we had to call them on, say, Channel 12 or whatever it was. And we absolutely had to call them, because it's a very windy part. The Cyclades are notoriously windy. The marina is incredibly tight, and there's such a risk to other boats if you come in unassisted. And they had a dinghy in the water and two guys on the dock, both, to guide us in. Wow. And if we didn't call them, there's €150 fine. Even if you park the boat without incident, they'll fine you €150.
Wow.
So that's so every marina is different, you know, but that's their rules, and like, I understand exactly why that's the case. So that's
brilliant about the tavernas.
That's what I was doing. I wasn't off lying in the sun. We were actually sailing.
So I think our viewers are going to love the fact that they missed an episode because you were sailing. So we'll definitely dedicate an episode to some of Sean's trips, I think. Before we wrap up, Sean, I'm just going to ask you one question. If you could sail historically with any group of people in the civilization of humanity, like whether it be Vikings or, you know, Phoenicians, or if you could go back in time and sail in one era of boats, let's say, what would you pick?
Brilliant question. And we can actually maybe do an episode on this as well, because I'm in the middle of a book about, it's called The Great Sea. I think it's about the Mediterranean, and it goes way back, like thousands of years ago. They were sailing in the Med chain. Wow. And in terms of, you know, sometimes we think that you know, people moving around is a modern phenomenon. It was like, it's been going on for thousands of years. The Med is so mixed, like from Cadiz in the southeast of from Cadiz through Gibraltar into the southeast of Spain, to the north of Africa, to Lebanon, to Cyprus, to Egypt, Israel. I mean, the history of that area is unbelievable. And like, this book kind of goes, it starts off like from 10,000 years ago to 2000 BC, 10,000 BC to 2000 BC. So it would be in ancient times in the Med, when all of that, when trade began, when the Phoenicians were trading with the southern attack. And I mean, it's very complicated as well, the history of it, both politically and everything else, but it's absolutely fascinating. And it's way more, it's amazing. I was actually, it blew my mind, the amount of and it's, you know, even the languages, what languages were they using back then? Was it, and what you find is a lot of the nautical terms, Shane, are very similar in countries, even as far as Ireland. There's some terms that are similar to what the Vikings use. There's some words in Italian.
Starboard, like starboard that's from the Vikings.
Steerboard, STYR board, which means, oh, that's brilliant. So that's actually, it was a big long rudder, which was an oar, which was used as a rudder to steer the board, and it went out the right-hand side of the boat. That's why it's called starboard side. That's from the Swedes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I that was one I picked up over when I was in Sweden. But like all that stuff is just amazing. So yeah, like it would be
it's incredible.
Hard to pick a group. When you asked me about group, I thought you were going to ask me individual, and I was thinking, wow, that's a tough one. I better get this right.
I'm going to ask you that on another episode.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant.
All right, brilliant. We'll wrap it up there. So thanks everybody for watching, and stay tuned for our next episode, and hopefully we'll be able to bring in another interview soon as well. So thanks for checking in with us again. We'll catch you the next time.
Cheers, Shane.